Okay, so here's a summary of the last 6 exams on the war topic. So Great War in Scotland. So there was no 9 marker last year at all. So we can't guarantee it'll come up as a 9 marker in the war this year, but it's a possibility. 2024 was about women in the vote. So the suffragist campaign, was that the main reason? So a 9 marker on that. You would do introduction, list your factors, the suffragist, suffragettes, women's war work. Then the main reason women gained to vote was women's war work. Then do your paragraph on war work, 2 marks. A paragraph on the suffragettes, what they did, 2 marks. And then the suffragists, a mark, that's 5 marks on knowledge. Then give a conclusion, your most important factor, and give 1 or 2 examples why that was the main factor. 2023 was in your prelim about DORA. So what was the biggest impact of DORA? Was it censorship? So the government controlled newspapers, they controlled the radio, they controlled letters to make sure that no bad news was being sent home from the front to people back in Britain. But other issues, DORA, you could do maybe a factor about how pubs opening hours were limited and beer was watered down. So people were not drunk and would work the next day and not sleep in. You could also talk about maybe the use of, like the government could deploy people to different jobs across Britain, like women to Gretna. So the 2023 9 marker is about DORA. So what was the biggest impact of DORA? Was it censorship? Do a paragraph on that. Was it changes to people's lives, such as you couldn't have fireworks or bonfires, pub hours were limited, beer was watered down? Or was it the fact that the government controlled like employment or workplaces in Britain and could allocate people to where they were needed? 2022, there was no 9 marker. 2021 was very similar to 2024 on the women in the vote, and the Qualification Scotland practice paper there was none. So 9 markers that haven't come up for a while, something like to what extent was the machine gun the most effective weapon? So you possibly could get something on that. Okay, that is the war topic. So change in Britain is a very popular topic for 9 markers. So in the last 6 exams, there's only been one that's not come up in 2023. Last year, it was about what caused health to improve in Britain. Was it medical advances, like smallpox vaccinations, the use of carbolic acid in operations, so instruments in hospitals were cleaner? Or was it because other factors could be clean water supply or better housing? So 2025 introduction, list your factors, what was the main one? Do a paragraph perhaps on medical advances, a paragraph on clean water, a paragraph on better housing. 2024 was about why did coal mines improve by 1914? Was it new laws? New laws like Coal Mines Act that banned boys from working underground. Women could not work underground either. Was it because they appointed safety inspectors to inspect mines? Or was it because another factor, new technology? The Davy safety lamp, what did that do to make mining safer? Or electric coal cutting machine, what did that do to make mining better? Or was it because of steam driven pumps that could pump water out of the mines? And finally, the last factor was basically, was it because of better safety? So for example, there was more than one ventilation shaft so people could escape in an emergency. Was it because like lifts now were steam driven and that was far safer? So think about what made mining safer. In the 2022 exam, there was 2 essays, but in this exam, you won't get a choice. The Chartists, why did the Chartists fail? Was it because of divisions? So for example, the 2 main leaders, one leader that wanted to use violence, one didn't want to use violence, and this meant it was difficult to basically plan and to be effective. Also, the Chartists were quite local across the UK. They were not a national body, and they lacked a national structure, and that perhaps made them less effective. Another factor that made another paragraph you could talk about was that petitions written by the Chartists failed. So petitions to Parliament, they made up signatures, they obtained them illegally, and this meant that Parliament ignored the Chartists. You could also say as well that society was improving. People were getting better jobs, more money, and more rights, and Chartists basically became less popular. Another reason is that some Chartists believed the best way to make your life better was education. Some believed gaining the vote was the best way. So look at that topic. And then after that, 2022, again, very similar to 2025. What made health better? Was it piped water, clean water, or was it better medicine, or was it better housing? By 2021, this has not come up for a while. To what extent were social changes the most important impact of the railways in Britain? So the railways brought many changes to Britain. Social changes is how it affected everyday life. Economic changes is involved money and jobs, and political changes. Political news could spread quicker. So this has not come up for a while. So introduction, the railways had a major impact socially, politically, economically. Overall, the main impact of the railways was social reasons. Then social reasons, so everyday life. Talk about you can go on holiday to like Largs near Glasgow or Broughty Ferry. The working class for the first time could travel to the beach or to the coast. Also mention that many people could live outside Glasgow or Edinburgh and get the train and commute into the city. Another social change was mail letters. So revise that. Then do economic changes as a paragraph. So economic, there was many jobs on the railways, engineers, drivers, conductors. Another thing you could talk about was a bigger market for products for coal mine owners, for steel owners, and they made higher profits. And then politically, you could talk about the fact that political news could spread quicker across Britain and people were better informed about politics. Also, MPs could travel back and forward from London from Parliament to their home area. So 2021, the railways impact has not come up for a while. And then the last one, the practice paper, is about, again, better health. Was it medical advances or was it clean water or better housing? So change in Britain, there's not been an essay for a while about the railways benefits. There's not been much about what was done to make factories better. So to what extent were new laws the main reason factories improved like working conditions? So new laws, the Factory Acts, children had to work less hours. They were given breaks and so on. There were safety inspectors appointed to make sure that new laws are followed in factories. Also talk about the fact that there was better technology. There was guards on machines, for example. So they made it safer. The invention of electricity and time made the equipment safer to use and so on. Also talk about as well that workers were given more rights, given holidays, given breaks, longer breaks. They were given like sick pay if they were off. So that's the change in Britain topic. And finally, Nazi Germany. So Nazi Germany last year, it came up, the question was about the churches, did they give or provide the most effective opposition to the Nazis? So opposition to the Nazis, there was the church, the Catholic Church especially. There was children like the swing kids or the White Rose, university students, younger people. Also the communists. So if this comes up again, there was many opposition to the Nazis, such as churches, such as youth movements and communists. The most effective opposition was the church. So many Catholic priests criticised Hitler. They tried to produce pamphlets criticising Hitler. The Pope also spoke out against Hitler. Youth movements. There was the swing kids who kind of rebelled against the Nazis, listened to swing music, wore different clothes. There was also the White Rose, who published pamphlets in Munich criticising the Nazis. And there was the communists. Communists were banned, but underground they kind of organised like campaigns, leaflet drops, tried to organise protests against the Nazis. 2024, there was nothing about Nazi Germany. 2023, there was a choice, but remember now, in the exam, you only do like 1 9-mark essay, it's not a choice anymore. So 2023, the Nazis, how successful were they in controlling youth movements and education? They were very successful. So talk about leisure factors. The Nazis were very successful at controlling youth movements and education. You could talk about the fact do the Hitler Youth. So they were successful because they taught boys to be good soldiers. They taught them like fitness skills, how to use guns, etc., how to be good Nazi Aryan soldiers. They were also effective because of the League of German Maidens. Young women were taught to be good mothers, to bring up children, taught domestic skills. So the youth movements are very effective at basically almost stereotyping boys and girls and giving them roles. Also, education, they were very, very effective. Talk about the fact there was Nazi textbooks that taught Nazi history, propaganda in schools. Teachers were trained as well to basically teach Nazi ideas. And also came up in 2023 was the Nazis, how they controlled Germany, how they consolidated their power. So remember, once they got power in January 1933, they got power. What did they do to consolidate their power? So violence, intimidation, that was one area. The Gestapo, the SS, the use of camps and so on. The use of creating fear in Germany to not criticise Hitler. Also talk about the Night of the Long Knives. 1934, Hitler wiped out the SA and the opposition was gone to the Nazis. Mentioned propaganda. So propaganda trying to turn Germans against other groups, other people, the communists, the Jews, so Nazis could control Germany. 2022, and the question paper, the practice paper, it was the rise of the Nazis. So this has not come up for a while. So by 1933 January, how did the Nazis gain power? Was it the Weimar Republic? Was it the fact that many Germans hated Weimar Germany? So introduction, leisure factors, Weimar Germany, Germans didn't like it, Hitler's promises, speeches, and the Great Depression or Wall Street crash. And then that is the Germany topic. Okay, good luck tomorrow. You'll smash it. All the best. I'll be in my room tomorrow if you want any more help. All right, take care.